Hello everyone and welcome to my Season 14 support item guide. I've been observing, experiencing, researching and theory crafting for a while now since the new season has been released, and I've come up with a pretty solid understanding of items and builds so far. I want to preface this video with saying that if you were wondering about how relevant all of my champ guides are for the new Season 14, the biggest change by far is the items in my opinion, so watching this video will give you a good idea for that for most, if not all, of the support guides that I have done. I will make other videos on Season 14 changes and maybe even update some champion support guides in the future if necessary. So for this video, I'm first going to talk about the items by themselves, and then I'm going to talk about cohesive builds for support champions. Let me quickly describe the tiers that I have made over here. I have powerful. This tier is when the items are splashable and strong, or if they are situational, when their situation arises, they're absolutely broken. For the next tier, we have decent. So this is the items are splashable, and if they're situational, in their situation, they are strong. And then I have the bait items, which we just want to avoid. Let's start off with the support quest items, and almost all of them are very strong. And so we're going to put most of them in the powerful tier here, but one of them is not going to make the cut, and that's going to be Celestial Opposition. I'm going to put this in bait tier. I really think this is a bait item. On paper, it's the most splashable, right? Who wouldn't want this damage reduction bubble, kind of like Crown of the Shattered Queen from Season 13? It seems solid, it seems splashable, but it just doesn't have that power that the rest of these support quest items are offering. I was the first to try this on many different champions, and it was very clear to me that this is just not really putting in the work. It didn't feel good, the numbers didn't look great, and then on websites with statistics and analyses, this item is not performing well either. Otherwise, with the rest of the support quest items, given their situation, because these are all quite situational, they're going to be very strong. You can't just kind of one-trick one of these on most champions, so I think Riot did a good job in kind of diversifying options for items here. One of the strongest new items that Riot has added to the game for supports is Trailblazer. Now, this is going to get micro-patched in the near future. Probably by the time this video has gone live, this might have been micro-patched. I couldn't find the numbers, but on 14.1 release, this item is fantastically powerful, and if it just gets touched down a little bit, it's still going to be very strong. In terms of what this item is giving us, it is affordable at 2400 gold, very affordable for supports. It gives us that health and that armor, which is always nice. It also gives us some move speed, but the passive is the main reason that this item is performing so well and feels so good. You get bonus move speed and you stack it up and you move really fast, and then you leave a trail that increases your allies' move speed as well. So just a very splashable item. And I think another reason why this item might be performing so well is because there aren't mythics anymore. There isn't an item that you kind of have to build first. You have options. And there's almost like a void to be filled for first item as supports now in Season 14. So it's nice to just be able to have an item that is a great first item and that is feeling really good. Next up is Zeke's, and so this got quite a big change from Season 13 to Season 14, mainly with its active component. And so what Zeke's does now is that when you cast your ultimate, you get a storm around you that deals magic damage per second and slows enemies. So this is just adding another form of utility and a little bit of base damage as well. And it's a pretty solid stat stick. It gives you health, it gives you armor, it gives you ability haste, and as I say, health and ability haste are the two best stats for a support to have, mainly behind movement speed, let's say. And this item is just feeling fantastic on engagers. The only issue with Zeke's is that it's a worse stat stick than Knight's Vow because we're getting 250 mana. That is probably one of the worst stats that we want to be investing in. And it can be tricky to get value from this active sometimes. So when you cast your ult, you really want to be in the enemy's faces and trying to get as much value out of this as possible, whereas an item like Knight's Vow is kind of AFK and it's going to give you value no matter what. So I would say that Zeke's kind of scales. The better you get at the game, the better you can use this item, then the more and more broken that it is. Speaking of Knight's Vow, I am going to put this in powerful, especially because it's just so easy to use. The stats that this item gives is just beautiful. A lot of health, a lot of armor, 15 ability haste, nothing to scoff at there. And you're always going to have at least one strong ally to place the Knight's Vow on that's going to do a lot of DPS. You can help them stay alive, you can get some healing from them as well. However, if you are playing engagers and you do want to have kill threat more than just kind of peeling in front to back for a fed carry, then Zeke's would make a little bit more sense. Next item in the powerful tier, we're going to put Frozen Heart there. And so this item got a huge buff in Season 14. Its stats are still great, but now it is much more affordable. It has gone down to 2,300 gold, which is fantastic for supports. It still gives us a lot of armor. It still gives us that 20 ability haste, which is awesome. And it still gives us both of those passives that we know and love from Frozen Heart. It reduces the attack speed with that aura, and it reduces incoming damage from basic attacks. The only thing that I do want to say about Frozen Heart is that it is a fantastic item, but we can't build it first and probably not second either. Because it doesn't give any health, there's no point in having a bunch of armor or a bunch of resistances with no health pool to back it up. So I would say first or second item, kind of a bait. Third and onwards, this is just going to be an absolute S tier item, given that you get value out of the slow field of its passive. Next up, we are going to put Staff of Flowing Water, and this has had quite a few changes from Season 13 to Season 14, but the most important thing is that it kind of stole Shurelia's passive of empowering and chanting your allies to give move speed. So let's have a look at what it does now. Here we go, gives you ability power, gives you that heal and shield power still, gives you some mana regen, gives 15 ability haste, which is awesome. And when you enchant an ally, if you heal or shield them, it gives you both AP and move speed. And so this is just going to be a very splashable item. The only problem with this item is that it gives absolutely no health stats. So if you feel like you can get away with a greedy build and you don't need that health pool, or if you're building it, second, third, fourth, especially on enchanters, then this is going to feel like a really good item. Okay, moving on, let's put Redemption in the powerful tier as well. And this item is very splashable. It's just a great item in general. You get your health, you get your 15 ability haste, and the active just feels really good in skirmishes and team fights. It's easy to get value out of this item. It gives you good stats, so there's no real reason to look over this item too often. And we are going to be talking about mage items for supports in this video as well. We're going to put Luden's Companion up there in powerful. Although this item is very expensive for support, 3,000 gold, it gives you a lot of ability power, it gives you some mana, which is fine for mage supports who are going to be spamming a lot more spells, gives you that 20 ability haste, which is awesome, but then its active is amazing for mage supports. Over time, you gain these shot charges up to a cap, and then when you damage enemies with an ability, it expends all of those charges to do a bunch of damage. And so for mages in the mid lane, they're probably going to be casting a lot more spells more often just to clear waves. But mage supports, they don't have to cast spells like that. They can save all of their shot charges to do a bunch of burst damage to enemy champions. This item feels good on mage supports, it is performing good, and it's just a fantastic item rush for most mage supports. And that's going to be all of the powerful items. So we're going to go to the decent items now, splashable or strong in their situation. Abyssal Mask, not the most splashable, but definitely strong given the correct situation. And the situation for Abyssal Mask is if you have a bunch of AP champions in your team and the enemy has a bunch of AP champions on the enemy team, then you get that magic resist and you decrease the enemy's nearby magic resist, and then it's just going to feel really good. And so its situation more so rises in maybe third and onwards as an item. And then we're going to put Mikael's in there as well. Mikael's gives you that health, gives you that ability haste. Awesome. Of course, given its situation, of course, a very situational item. If you need to cleanse CC on your carries, you're going to build this item. Otherwise, we can't really be building this item too often. Ardent Sensor, kind of a similar argument to Mikael's. It is decent, it is solid. It doesn't have any health pool, but if you have a fed carry that attacks a lot, we can get this, it's going to feel good. It is worth noting that Ardent Sensor gives no ability haste, so this is why this item is not going to be any further up than decent. So for Thornmail, this is going to be pretty obvious, hopefully, that this is a very situational item. If the enemy has a bunch of auto attackers and they heal a lot and you want to cut that healing, Thornmail is going to do its job, as it has for the last however long it's been in the game. Earliest we should be considering building this item is second and onwards, but preferably third and onwards unless we really need that heal cut as fast as possible. The only thing is that it doesn't give any ability haste either, so not the best stats, but its passive is why we would want to build this item. Then we're going to put Morello, and so Morello is really strong. I almost put it in the powerful tier for this season, but it's just not quite there because it is just still too situational. What they have done to Morello is they've made it 2,200 gold, very affordable, and 90 ability power. This is insane for the cost of this item. So we're going to get a lot of ability power, which mage supports are going to love, and 15 ability haste is fantastic as well. And then of course its heal reduction passive, fantastic item at the top of decent tier. Okay, next up we're going to have Moonstone. We're going to put that in the decent tier, and for Moonstone, It gives some really good stats. It gives you that ability power, it gives you that ability haste, it gives you that health, and it still has the same passive as it had from Season 13. So that's great. This is a good item. Not many champions are going to want to build this. They can't get the most value out of this, but if your champion likes to use it, it's going to do well. I've just spent the last like 5 minutes looking for the Chemtech Putrefier icon in here. Unless I've gone blind, it's just not here. But this is going to be a decent item as well. It is extremely affordable, gives us that heal cut, some decent stats, 15 ability haste as well. And this gives you that healing reduction if you do any type of damage. So this could be a little bit better for some supports that just struggle to apply Morello very easily. Solid item, definitely look to build that when it's necessary, when you need that heal cut. Echoes of Helia. So this is a strange one. Now, the reason that it's in this tier is because the stats it gives are just absolutely fantastic. 2200 gold, 40 ability power. It gives us that health, gives us 20 ability haste, gives us that mana regen. It's one of the most cost-efficient items in the entire game in Season 14, so we can't look past this item just as a stat stick alone. The passive, or we can call it an active, I guess, it's just a little bit clunky. Not many champs can use this well. We could consider building this on the usual suspects like Sona, like Bard, but otherwise it's hard to splash this around too much. But just for the stat stick component of it alone, this is going to make the decent tier. We're going to put Chevaliers in decent as well, and my initial reaction to Chevaliers from Season 14 was not a good one. I saw that it just didn't have its passive at all anymore. It only has that active. But it is a fantastic stat stick again. It has a lot of ability power. It's very affordable. 15 ability haste. Cool. This is going to be a good item, especially the higher elo you are, and then fights are more explosive and decisive. And so this active can definitely be useful. I almost put this as a bait item. I'm not a fan of this too much, especially because it no longer gives any health and it doesn't have that passive. But sometimes enchanters are going to struggle with an item to build first, and this can be a decent item just to chuck first in your builds. So this is kind of at the bottom of decent, I would say. Storm Surge. So if I'm not mistaken, this is getting nerfed in the micro patch of 14.1, but at the moment it is performing very well. I wouldn't put it in powerful for supports because it does require us to do a lot of upfront damage with that 35% of a champion's maximum health. It's just going to be a little bit tougher for support mages than mid lane mages, of course. But fantastic stats, right? A lot of ability power. That magic pen, that's going to be fantastic as an early item, generally second item. And that move speed to roam around as a support, that's always going to be nice. So I'd say this is kind of like middle to top of decent for mage supports until it gets nerfed, and then, you know, we'll see what the numbers look like afterwards. Crypt Bloom, one of the weirdest items that they have introduced in Season 14. Gives us that ability power, gives us percentage magic pen. Awesome for the later the game goes on, the later in your build, this is going to feel nice. 15 ability haste, great. Relatively affordable as far as mage items go for support. And then this passive where if you get a kill or an assist, it creates that healing nova that heals your allies. And so the reason that we're going to build this item on mage supports instead of the Void Staff is because it has that ability haste, which the Void Staff lacks. It has that utility, which of course the Void Staff lacks, and it is more affordable. So if you're looking for magic pen, if the enemy is starting to stack a bunch of magic resist because you're a mage support and you have an AP mid or jungle, let's chuck this in our build, probably third item or later. Let's just put that over there. Fantastic. And now we are going to put Liandry's up next. So Liandry's, the stats that it gives is a lot different to Season 13, right? It used to give that mana, but now it's swapped out with health. So this is great for certain supports, kind of like Zyra, Brand, and Heimerdinger. If they want to build Liandry's and Ryleys, they're going to have a lot of health. It's going to feel kind of weird to see how tanky they are with these items. But, you know, same old, we get that burn of the max health of enemies, so this is going to be great against bruisers and tanks. And it's hard to not get value from this item, so we're going to put it in decent tier. And then we're going to pair that with Ryleys. So Ryleys has always been one of the most, if not the most affordable mage item, and that is no different in Season 14. 2600 gold, a lot of ability power, a lot of health, and then we get that utility. Great. I almost put Ryleys in bait tier because we don't really want to build this item super early anymore. Like first item, we saw that a bunch on Heimerdinger in the past. I think if we build this item first, we're just missing out on all of these strong mage items that we just no longer get to stack up to do a bunch of damage together because we have that Luden's Companion. fantastic item. We have the Storm Surge with that Magic Pen, or the Liandry's, and then we have that 2-item Power Spike. We're feeling really good. If a Riley is in there first or second, it's just taking away from that spike. So I would say stay away from it first item. Earliest we should consider is second, but probably third and onwards it's starting to feel the best. All right, let's move on to the bait items. Locket of the Iron Solari. People are still just kind of muscle memory building this item first because that's what they were used to for the whole of Season 13, I think. But this item is just not doing very well. It doesn't look good, it doesn't feel good, and let me explain why. So Locket has only 10 ability haste, and it doesn't have any passive, so it doesn't give the resistances anymore. It just has that active shield, and so that's quite a defensive item. The stats are pretty underwhelming, to be honest, so we're not getting any amazing stats, we're not getting any passive, we're getting a decent active, but it's not something that we're going to look to build on engages if we want a lot of damage. My prediction is that we're going to see this item drop out of people's inventories in the near future unless it starts to get some buffs from Riot. The only thing I will say in Locket's defense is that for a first item, it's not that bad. The later you go, the worse it's going to feel because it just gives you that active, right? And we're not really getting to scale anything. And first items for supports, if they don't want to build Trailblazer, then it's a bit tricky to think about what type of item you would want to rush. We wouldn't want to rush Frozen Heart. Zeke's is, you know, it's a solid first item, to be fair. Knight's Vow, you don't really have a fed carry to scale its numbers that well. But we're going to see more experimentation away from Locket, and I would encourage you to never build Locket after first item and consider not building it at all as well. Next up for the bait item is Dawn Core. And I'm going to preface this by saying if you build this early, it's an absolute bait. On enchanters that love just having really low cooldowns and spamming out spells, if we can build this 4th, 5th, 6th, it's going to feel really good. But this is a very unique item. We've never really had a pure stat stick of an item in League of Legends before, really. There's no unique passive, there's no active. And so in order to make the most of this stat stick of an item, we want to have as many stats and items and, you know, levels before we can get a lot of value out of it. So this is going to be a bait if it's the first 3 items, and then 4, 5, 6 is going to be in a higher tier. Which one of those higher tiers you can decide for yourself. Zhonya's extremely expensive item now. It's going to be really hard to afford this item to fit it in our pool anymore. What they've done is they've made it 3,250 gold. Even by mage item standards, this is very expensive. Doesn't give any ability haste anymore. We don't get a nice and cheap stopwatch to sit on anymore. The stopwatch active from Season 13 is now inbuilt into the Seeker's Arm Guard, which is 1,600 gold instead. So I urge you to find another solution to having survivability, whether it's that Liandry's and the Rileys, or whether it's just more precise positioning. This item for mage supports is a bait. Maybe if you have a ton of gold, 5th item, 6th item, or if you're super fed, maybe 4th item, but really this item deserves to be in the bait tier. Malignance. So this is going to be a bit of an interesting one. So what Malignance does is that it gives you ultimate haste, and then when you damage an enemy with your ultimate, it's going to burn them and reduce their magic resist. So it sounds pretty good, right? The stats are solid. 80 ability power, a bunch of mana, 20 ability haste. Cool. Ultimate haste can be very useful for champions that are dependent on their ult. But the thing is, we have to be choosing this over another item, right? So if we build it, that's just going to delay when we can build Crypt Bloom to start penetrating the enemy's magic resist. It's going to probably be in place of Storm Surge, which is going to give you that magic pen and just feel better overall. The only champion I would say that this is actually a good item on is Lux support for now. Every other champion, Xerath, Brand, Zyra, it's going to be decent on Vel'Koz as well, but really this item is not performing that well. So it's tricky why I put this in the bait tier, but it's mainly because we don't get to choose a bunch of items. It's going to delay crucial items that mage supports need. Next up, Vigilant Wardstone. The only time I can see making an argument for Vigilant Wardstone is when the game is probably going to end in the near future, and this is just going to be better than components of a completed item. It's never going to be better than a full completed item. It's not going to get close. It doesn't have the percentage scaling anymore. So what it does now is just kind of a stat stick, right? And it builds out of the Watchful Wardstone. So both of them are stat sticks, and they're okay stat sticks. It gives you that extra control wards and the extra vision wards when you have the Vigilant Wardstone. But 2,300 gold for an item like this, I'd much rather have a full legendary item. So never build it first, never build it second. And then if you're in a fast-paced game, because sometimes you're not going to get to complete 3 full support items, right? Then maybe we can start to consider this, but otherwise I think this quite rightly deserves to be in the bait tier. Next up, this might be a surprise to some of you in here because I have talked quite highly of this item in the past, but we're going to put Anathema's Chains. So this item, it is very inefficient in terms of its stats. It gives us flat health and 20 ability haste, great, but it just doesn't give us anything else. And remember, we have to be building this over something else. Are we going to be building it over Zeke's? Are we going to be building it over Knight's Vow? Are we going to be building it over Frozen Heart or Abyssal Mask? I just can't see an argument to build this item over any one of those others, and then kind of by necessity, it's going to get shoved down to the bait tier. I don't see when we would want to build this item. There's no situation that sticks out that says this is the best item by far. We just have to get it. And also notice how it's more expensive than all of the other Engager or melee support items, right? More expensive than Abyssal Mask, than Knight's Vow, than Locket, than Zeke's, than Frozen Heart, than all of them. And for the last bait item for this video, Shadow Flame. So this item, very expensive. It is going to be 3,200 gold. It gives no ability haste. It does give a lot of ability power, sure. But again, this is going to have to be in place of Storm Surge, which gives us that move speed. It is much more affordable. The passive feels better. It's going to have to be in the place of, you know, the Rylai's and the Liandry's or the Crypt Bloom and all of that good stuff. Way too expensive. Can't make an argument for it. Don't see mage supports ever wanting to build this item. The magic damage and the true damage critically striking low health enemies, it sounds very enticing, doesn't it? You kind of get them low and then you're bursting them as a mage support and then pop. This is going to put that final nail in the coffin, but it's just, it doesn't feel that good and it's too expensive. If you wanted to hear me talk about another item and I haven't, it's because I don't even consider it an option. It's not a support item. It should be picked in another role, or it's just way too situational to be worth mentioning. I imagine that a lot of you wanted me to talk about more of the tank items. If they don't give any utility, if they don't give any ability haste, if they do damage to surrounding minions, all of those things, it's just not really going to make it worth considering as a support item, or of course if it's too expensive. Thinking back on this, the only item that maybe I should actually add to the list is this Unending Despair. Gives us health, armor, 10 ability haste, not the best ability haste, but relatively affordable. And if we get to stay in combat for a long time, it's going to heal us quite significantly. So this is like, in a way, a replacement to Radiant Virtue, which has hurt a lot of supports in the new season. And what it isn't saying on this tooltip here is that its range is 650. So if you are within 650 units of enemies, or however many enemies are in that range, you're going to get healed depending on how many enemies are surrounding you. And if you are in like middle to low elo and the fights are very sloppy and extended, and maybe you're playing some niche champions, or maybe just get to survive for a long time, like Taric or Braum or Zac, maybe even a tanky Rakan, I can see this item given value. I don't have the strongest opinion on this item right now. I would hope that you guys test it out a little bit, but maybe that is worth chucking into the tier, and we can maybe put it at the bottom of decent for now. Next, we're going to be talking about builds for melee supports, enchanters, and mages in general, and then we're going to be moving on to individual supports that don't fit these blueprints. For the support quest item for melee supports, we're actually going to put the Solstice Slay item here, not the Celestial Opposition. Like I said, it's a bait item. And Solstice Slay, it applies on slows, it applies on hard CCing your targets, and it has quite a long cooldown. So it's not like we get less value from this if we only engage once every 10-15 seconds. It does currently have a 20-second cooldown, and what it does is it heals yourself and the lowest health ally and gives both of you some move speed. This can stack up quite a lot of value over the duration of a game, so that's the item that we're going to be generally running for melee supports. Now, how we're going to back this up is it's generally going to be Trailblazer if our champion wants to have some of that mobility. It's not going to be for everyone, but very solid item. First or never really for the melee supports. And then I think we should be considering Zeke's a lot of the time. If we want to have a little bit more agency and have a little bit more threat, it's going to be the Zeke's. If we want to have a little bit more front to back and peeling and defense, it's going to be the Knight's Vow. Probably choosing between one of those. I will say that Zeke's is a much better first item than Knight's Vow though. And then after these initial items, we're going to go into the situationals. Like we mentioned, Abyssal Mask if they have a lot of AP and we have a lot of AP. Thornmail if they have auto attackers and we need some heal cut. Frozen Heart if they have a bunch of auto attackers. Let us squeeze the boots in here before we forget about those. Of course, whichever one is going to give the most value. Not the biggest fan of Moby boots. I'm probably not going to even include that here. If we run out of ideas, we can always just kind of slap a locket in there as well. For enchanters, our go-to support quest item is probably, for the most part, it's going to be this Dream Maker. And so what this item does is that when you heal or shield an ally, you place a couple of bubbles on them, and one of the bubbles is going to reduce some incoming damage within the next 3 seconds, and one of them is going to amplify your ally's next auto attack with magic damage for the next 3 seconds. This doesn't require you to be in combat or anything, so sometimes this can just go to waste. Maybe you're just healing or shielding your ally before they can use the bubbles, and then it's on cooldown, and it has, you know, kind of just below maybe a 10-second cooldown, so it can be a bit clunky to get a lot of value out of this. It's also very unsatisfying. You don't ever see this to do anything. You can't clearly see the bubbles. You can't clearly see any animations. But you just kind of forget about it, and then you look, and you're 25, 30 minutes in the game. This has quite a lot of numbers onto it, so it definitely is doing a lot. Our main boot choice for enchanters is going to be that Lucidities, and then what we're going to do after this, you know, kind of our first main item rush, we're going to be choosing probably between Moonstone and Shurelya still for first item. Moonstone, if your champion uses it, that's going to feel great. If not, then Shurelya's is going to be a reasonable kind of stat stick for the first item before all of those situationals really get time to be valuable and amp up your teammates. And then we're going to consider the 2 powerful support items for the most part. Redemption, very splashable, gives you that health pool that can go quite a long way in a lot of situations. Or a Staff of Flowing Water, more utility, a bit of a greedier item, and if you can apply this readily, that's going to be a great item. Otherwise, all of the situational enchanter items are great. We're going to probably lead off with one of the most splashable items over here, and then we're going to move into Ardent or Mikhail's if we need it, or Chemtech Putrefier if we need it. Again, I don't have the icon here, so I can't show you guys that. But honestly, there's not a lot of pressure on enchanters this season. You can't really go wrong with building items. They're all in a pretty good spot. They're all quite stat efficient. The main point for this one is just be careful that we're not one-tricking Shurelya's just because we're used to doing that in Season 13. Before I forget, let me put Dawncore in, but right at the end of the build when we are going to get the most value out of that item. For mages, that Zazak Realm Spike item, fantastic for mages, going to do a lot of damage. And then for the most part, we're going to be leading off with Luden's Companion. There it is. And then for our second item, it's either going to be between Storm Surge if we really want that burst, or Liandry's if they have a few more bruisers and tanks. And then we're going to be starting to move into more situational territory. If they're starting to build Magic Resist, we'll build Crypt Bloom for the Magic Pen. If they have a bunch of healing and we need some heal cut, we can consider the Morellos. Of course, Rylays is going to be an item worth considering, maybe third and onwards as well. And then we can just kind of build the items that we hadn't for the rest of our items. And we're going to mainly be going Sork Shoes, of course, for mages. That Luden's and that Sork Shoes is going to be a huge item spike, and Luden's plus Storm Surge or Liandry's with the Sork Shoes, a solid spike as well. What mage supports used to really flourish off in Season 13 is 1 completed item in Sork Shoes. Now, 1 completed item Sork Shoes, 2 completed item Sork Shoes is going to be very big spikes. And maybe we can consider that 5th or 6th item Zhonya's if the game is going really late. Next up, I want to talk about several champions that are going to be mixing and matching some items, and they can afford to do so because of their unique identities. So first off, let's talk about Bard. He loves Trailblazer. He's building it right now. He's probably going to build it post micro patch nerf as well. And if we want to get as tanky as possible, we have Trailblazer, we have Knight's Vow, we have that Locket if we are lacking alternatives. We have that Frozen Heart. We have all of those standard kind of tanky items, but probably not going to be the best user of Zeke's. If we don't need that much tankiness because they don't have much lockdown or they're quite low in damage, etc., then we can consider some more greedy options. We can consider chucking in Imperial Mandate. Although it gives no health, this item is fantastic on Bard. It is very easy to apply. It consistently applies when he stacks up his meeps and has a lot of slows with his auto attacks and has 20 ability haste and his Qs. But that's really greedy, right? No tanky stats at all, so be a little bit careful there. There's also Redemption, kind of like in the middle. It is a great item. It's fantastic for Bard, and it has that utility, and it's going to be better than a tanky item if we don't need the tanky stats. Finally, it's going to be worth mentioning Morello's as well. If we don't need tanky stats, this is going to be a solid option. I forgot to mention, but Helia is a great greedy item on Bard. It gives him that health, it gives him that ability haste, and he can use its mechanics quite well. He can heal his teammates with Font of Life or with his W, and he can apply damage quite readily with his auto attacks and his Q. And the reason that I'm talking about mixing and matching items is because we should never just one-trick an item set for a champion, right? We want to build according to the situation. How tanky do you need to be? How greedy can you be? How well can your champion do this mixing and matching and still get value? And not only would we mix and match items, but we mix and match runes. Maybe that's a video topic for another day. Next up, for Thresh, we're going to be mixing and matching, but in a slightly different sense. So we're going to run that Solstice Slay, of course, but then we're either going to be going a more roaming-oriented build or a more tanky front-to-back oriented build. For the roaming, we're going to go Mobies, we're going to go Trailblazer, and then we're going to pretty much stack as much health, resistances, and ability haste as we can with all of the melee support items we've been mentioning. Zeke's is a very good item on him as well. Either that route, or the more tanky, the more front-to-back, we're going to be going Lucidities, and then we're going to be either building Zeke's first, or even Knight's Vow, or if none of the above, maybe we can consider Locket for lack of better alternatives. But the main idea is that we're either going to be roaming around, keeping up with a fast pace of game, or it's a slower game. Your role in the game is to more peel for your fed carries, and then we're going to adjust our build accordingly. All right, next up, Rakan, and his mixing and matching is actually going to start with the support quest item. We can go Solstice Slay, or we can go the Dream Maker even. And I have tested out the Dream Maker. I ended up with a lot of numbers by the end of the game. Solstice Slay, always a solid option as well. But if you are expecting more extended fights and you really want to be greedy and you're not too concerned with selfish tankiness, then Bubble is going to do more for your allies, right? Whereas Slay is going to give you that sustain and that move speed if you might need it. And then let's talk about Rakan's greedy completed items after the support quest item. Redemption is going to be kind of in the middle ground, gives great stats, not full tank, not full greed, but a lot of usefulness and utility. And then Staff of Flowing Water, this is kind of the new Shirelias that we were talking about. You can apply it so easily with spamming your E's and spamming your Q's with high ability haste on Rakan. If you don't need tankiness, don't build tankiness. Having so much utility and uptime with your spells can go a very long way on Rakan. It's a skill in and of itself to learn when you can afford to be a bit more greedy with your builds on Rakan. I encourage you to try that out for yourself. Otherwise, we can kind of go down all of the Enchanter items for Rakan if you want to be really greedy, right? We can consider the Mikhails, the Ardent Censer, all of that good stuff. Generally on Rakan, you just can't afford to go full squishy, full greedy. We're going to get maybe 1, max 2 greedy items before it's probably realistic that we just have to build some more tankiness. Otherwise, for Rakan's tanky build, we're going to go Solstice Slay, we're going to go Zeke's fantastic item on Rakan, then we can go the Knight's Vow and the Frozen Heart if it looks good, and then for lack of better alternatives, we can chuck in a Locket. Next up, Alistar, the last mix and matcher that I'm going to be talking about. Alistar has 2 modes. He has a roaming proactive mode and he has a defensive peeling mode. So for the roaming proactive mode, we're going to go Solstice Slay, and then we're going to go Mobies with the Trailblazer to just run around as much as possible, and then we're just going to be building general melee support items. For the front-to-back peeling build, we are going to go Lucidities, and then just foregoing the Trailblazer and straight into getting as tanky and as much ability haste as possible. Okay, now let's move on to the final section of this video. Individual champions that it's harder to generalize for. We're just going to discuss them one by one because there's no other way to do it. The main difference is going to be coming from the support quest items, so I'm not going to have to spend too much time on a lot of these champions, except for Pyke. And so let's start off with Pyke because he's a very unique support. Pretty much the only support ever to just stack lethality. Maybe behind Senna at certain times, but that's besides the point. So for Pyke, we are going to want to go most likely the Blood Song so that we can have as much damage as possible. I think Solstice Slay, given that healing and that move speed, is not quite what Pyke is looking for, and there are no real alternatives outside of the Blood Song. So we're going to try and get as many kills and snowballing with Blood Song as possible. And then Umbral Glaive, still a fantastic item on Pyke. Lucidity Boots, probably a better option than Moby Boots, although maybe this can be a little bit of personal preference. There are 2 main new lethality items that I want to talk about. Opportunity, this is an item that gives AD, it gives lethality, gives move speed, fantastic for Pyke, of course. Being out of combat, you gain more lethality, he's going to be out of combat, this is almost designed for Pyke. and then it hangs around for a little bit after you've done damage to champions. And then if you get a champion takedown, you get decaying move speed for a while. So that's really, really good for Pyke. It's 2,700 gold, which is a very affordable item as far as completed lethality items go. So that's great. The thing is that Pyke had quite a lot of good lethality items anyway, so it's hard to kind of fit this in over other items. Umbral Glaive, such a fantastic item for Pyke. Youmuu's Ghostblade, not much has changed on this front. I think they've just removed some of the ability haste and it gives a bit more move speed out of combat. And still, fantastic item for Pyke. Axiom Arc, still a fantastic item for Pyke. But yeah, apart from the new lethality item of opportunity, there's the Voltaic Cyclo Sword, which gives ability haste for these lethality items, which is getting a little bit more rare now. And that is the one where you have kind of an energized auto attack that deals a bunch of bonus damage and slows, and it allows you to stack the energizing faster as a passive. Some of the best performing items on Pyke is the Youmuu's Ghostblade and the new item opportunity, and then of course we're going to weave in an Umbral in our build as well. So what I would do is probably Umbral into Youmuu's, into opportunity, into Axiom or Voltaic or Edge of Night if we kind of need that shield buffer. I will say that I haven't been researching or playing Pyke, so I haven't been able to feel these out firsthand. So please, if you're a Pyke man, let me know down below what has been feeling good for you. But this is just kind of my assumptions looking at the items and knowing the champion. Next champion, Nautilus. And the main reason that Nautilus is in this unique build section is because he is a fantastic user of Bloodsong. That item that is kind of the new Even Shroud. It empowers your next auto attack and it causes the target to take increased damage. And so he can use that really well with his Q plus auto attack, and then it just feels really good on him. The #1 ranked player in Korean solo queue at the moment is spamming Nautilus with Bloodsong. It looks like it's doing fantastic work for him. And not a lot of engagers get to use this item. Well, not a lot can just find these free auto attacks. Maybe Leona is another one that kind of comes to mind. Otherwise, Nautilus is going to do a really good job with this item. And it's the only realistic support quest item that melee supports can build that actually does damage and looks for picks, right? Because Solstice Slay is about that move speed and the sustain. Otherwise, I don't think we should be building Trailblazer too much on Nautilus. He's not as much of roaming around to sides. He's more about standing his ground around the middle of the map and finding picks in that area. And then we're just going to standard melee support items for him. For Senna, we're going to be going Bloodsong on her because it's so easy for her to apply that passive with her Q and her auto attack with her long range. Now, the main build that is working out for Senna is a form of lethality stacking. Umbral Glaive, fantastic item for her and so easy for her to clear out wards. Voltaic Cyclosword, this stacks faster with dashes or stealth, and Senna's E, I believe, counts towards that stealth. And if she takes Fleet as well, that is an energized mechanic that gets charged faster. So I think the ideal Senna build is probably going to be Bloodsong into Umbral, into Cyclosword, and then either straight into items rounding out your build, or you can try to stack some more lethality. If we want to start rounding our build out, we're going to add in the Rapid Fire Cannon for that range and attack speed, and the Lord Dominic's Regard for some extra damage against tanks. Or we can stop by and just add one more of those lethality items, probably Collect It. That's looking like it's performing really well. It did get nerfed in the micro patch, but it's still a really good item for Senna. Or we can replace that with maybe Youmuu's, or even Opportunity. For Renata, the only difference from the general Enchanter builds that we're going to be talking about is that she just struggles to apply the Ardent Sensor and the Staff of Flowing Water as easily as other enchanters can because of her long E cooldown. Unfortunately, this is going to apply to the Dreammaker as well, but there's not really going to be many good alternatives to the Dreammaker, so we're just going to have to go that anyway and just put a lot more emphasis on Redemption because it gives some good stats and it's always usable by her comparatively to these other Enchanter items. For Nami, we're going to be rushing Mandate because that item just does so well with her E. And then after Mandate, we're probably going to be looking for Ardent Sensor. If we're buffing up someone to be using our E auto attack, that's probably when we're going to be looking to be picking Nami anyway. And Nami is one of the champions that can use Echoes of Helia quite well as well, so that's something worth considering. I want to lump Braum, Time, and Tarek together for this next part, and they are going to go Solstice Slay. They don't really want to go Zeeks because they're more about front to back and peeling and being defensive, and that's generally what Wardens want to do. They can also extend fights a lot better. And so this is where we can start to consider some of those more expensive niche tank items like Jack Show or like Unending Despair or even Hollow Radiance. We didn't even talk about this one, but this is kind of like a Sunfire burning effect. It causes you to deal magic damage per second. And maybe in low elo, if you're playing these champions and fights are going on for really long and you're a bit tanky, then we could get value out of that as well. Builds near the start of the season can change as frequently as day by day, while everything is getting felt out by the community. I didn't want to wait until all the dust has settled, but I'm coming back a few days later after I made the original video, and the latest update I wanted to give is that Bloodsong in its current state in 14.1b may very well be broken, and any champ that can use this item should, or at least let's try it out together. Ashe, Senna, Nautilus, Leona, like we mentioned in the video. We should add Pyke in there as well. But we can even try it on some more ranged champions. Bard is looking like he's having a lot of success in it as well. Maybe on a roaming Janna or even a Sona. It just kind of depends how broken the item really is, and it's going to need more testing. Other engagers would love the damage amp, right? Because they don't get any damage from Solstice Slay and Celestial Opposition, being a bit of a bait item. If you want to kill people, then being able to get that burst damage and the damage amp from Bloodsong is going to be really strong. But it can just be hard to find those consistent auto attacks on some other engagers like Ral and Alistar. But if the item ends up being broken, maybe we can just chuck it on them as well, find an auto attack in there somewhere, and we're going to get a lot of value out of it. I do also want to report that I am making this update post 14.1b, the micro patch, and Trailblazer is now in the decent tier rather than the OP tier. From the micro patch, it hit its health, it hit its cost, and those are going to be pretty significant nerfs. Storm Surge hit, and it is slightly worse, but I wouldn't say it's so much worse that it's now in the bait tier. That's going to remain in the decent tier. I hope I didn't miss anything. If I did, if I missed an item you wanted me to talk about, if I missed a champion that you wanted me to talk about, I'm sorry. I can't cover everything, but I try to cover as much as I can. So I hope you found this video helpful. I would love if this video became a resource for all support players to reference for items and builds. So if you agree with what I said, if you disagree, if you have your own opinions, please share them down below in the comments so that people can click on this video and be met with a wide range of perspectives to get the best sense of what we're going to be doing this season. I hope you found this video helpful. Thanks for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed. Big thank you to all of my Patreons over here. I really couldn't do this without you. The links for coaching, for Patreon, for my School of Support Discord server, for socials, they're all going to be linked in the description below. Any and all support is greatly appreciated.